Welcome to Fast Friends, the podcast that centers on high performance storytelling with high performance athletes and individuals whose norm is to live at the very top 0.01%, whether it's competition, coaching, business, or life. We dive into their stories, how they got there, the journey, and life on the other side. I'm your host, Dan Walsh, and I'm joined by my co host, Justin Faber. Justin and I were rowing teammates in college and later on the U.S. national team. Though we went on separate journeys, since then we've come together to bring these stories to life and share perspectives with our audience as well as our guests. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Fast Friends with Dan Walsh, hosted by the Mettle Factory. We are here with Luke and Steve in the nosebleeds, Justin Faber, my co-host. And I think the term GOAT is way overused, but man, it's hard not to describe Caryn Davies as such. So instead of saying the greatest all time, I will say this is one of the most impactful athletes to the sport of rowing, period. Just period. Beyond generational athlete, beyond amazing athlete, beyond amazing activist for athletes. Caryn, we're really excited to have you here. Thanks for coming on board.
Thanks, Tim. Still makes me uncomfortable when people slather on the praise like that, because I don't know, I still get like Twitter pated when I think about my rowing heroes when I was growing up.
Well, it's about to get worse because Justin's about to introduce you to the audience.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, to Dan's point, I mean, we're ecstatic to have you on. I think just again, what we like to do is just explain for the audience, who we're talking to and why do we have them on the show. So just a quick bio again for the audience, and you can plug your ears, but I mean, I could take at least 10 minutes of today just going through all of the accolades and accomplishments to our guest, Caryn Davies. But I'm just going to keep it top level. We'll put a link to a full bio in the description when we post the video. But again, just to set the table for the audience, Caryn's a 3-time Olympian in 04, 08, 2012, 2-time gold medalist, silver medalist as well, 4-time world champion. She won a Collegiate National Championship at Harvard. She rowed at Oxford. She was elected president of the United States Olympians and Paralympians Association. She was the winner of the 2023 Thomas Keller Medal for the most prestigious, which is the most prestigious international award that the sport of rowing bestows. She's the only American to ever have won this award. And if that wasn't enough on her rowing side of the accomplishments, she holds an undergraduate degree from Harvard. She holds a JD from Columbia, and she holds an MBA from Oxford, and currently is in private law practice at her firm, Podium Law, which focuses on legal services for entrepreneurs and investment professionals. Okay, like I'll take a deep breath now. We already talked about GOAT status, but I'll just say that for Mettle Factory and Fast Friends, like we've punched way above our weight today, and we're gonna keep the momentum going. And yeah, Caryn, I couldn't be happier to have you on today. Like I said, before the show started, I've never met you, but I know who you are as somebody that was in the rowing community for a while, as well as kind of would see you row by on the Charles that we shared the same home course together and be like, oh, that's her. So yeah, psyched to have you on, and we can't wait to get into it.
Justin, everything you just listed as an accomplishment to me was just like hanging out with my friends and having a good time.
It's amazing.
Well, this is for a different episode, but I do remember being able to have a fun time, right, when the training was over. So I always loved the energy at post parties. That there was a similarity I feel like you and I had about liking to be a little bit eccentric off the water, not as much on the water. But that leads us to God. It's a lot to take in even for us. Being your teammate, we're 20 years outside of Athens. So the kind of beginning of the women's 8 legacy, and you were in that boat. I remember watching those races. One of the biggest things we like to ask our guest right away is, why do you think you're here? Why do you think we'd want to interview you? And why do you think what you did in rowing is so important?
I can't pretend to know why you asked me, but I can share what my goals are for being here. I've actually been doing a good number of podcasts and interviews lately. Uh, and I want to go back to a formative moment in my career, which was when my father retired. And he had a retirement party with an open mic. And his former students had come from the four corners of the globe to attend his retirement party. And one by one, people got up and spoke about how much his mentorship meant to them and how it had changed their lives. And at the time, I was working for a big law firm, and I just felt like, what am I doing? Like, when I retire, on the trajectory that I am right now, when I retire, no one's going to make that kind of speech about me. And I really started to think about, how can I make a difference in the world, like help people. And I've realized lately that one of the ways I can do that is by sharing my story, um, and showing just a little bit of compassion to the people I meet, or maybe who I don't get to meet, but get to hear about what I have to say. So I'm here to connect with people in your audience and hopefully to make their lives just a little bit better.
Oh, that that's amazing. That's compassion, right? It's one of the big C's that I think is missed from high performance, right?
Yeah.
Compassion not only for those around you, but for yourself, and how important that is to foster that, to practice that. Um, it's been a big C of mine, of along with consistency and courage.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the the impact, right? The impact, and you say, our audience, and I think it's ours and yours, right? This is really meant to be for now, especially rowers by rowers, and get a lot of our stories out there that most people don't realize, and even we don't realize about ourselves. That's been the fun thing. And you know, where do you think, knowing where you are now, and you just articulated what your motivation was, like, when did you think you started to figure out you had to, like, what was the grind for you, like when you first started rowing and you realized that you wanted to take another step beyond, say, maybe high school rowing, or even maybe it happened in your collegiate career, but when did you really start to embrace the grind of what it would take to be an Olympian?
It's funny that you call it a grind. I didn't think of it that way when I was um, making the steps toward that elite level. So when I started rowing in high school, I was an awkward kid. I mean, let's be real, I still am awkward. We all are. But I was a super awkward kid, very shy, and um, actually got scouted in the supermarket. The local rowing coach spotted me, and walking up like this, kind of a big gruff guy, quite weathered as coaches often are, and he said, "I want you for rowing." And I was terrified. um, but I went down to the boathouse and I looked around and I was like, these are my people. These are kids like me. They're tall, they're awkward, and we're just like trying to fit in. And so I found a place where I fit in, where I felt like I belonged. And because of that, I wanted to do it all the time. I wanted to be at the boathouse, and I tried hard to start out because I wanted to fit in. But of course, once you start to get good at something, and of course it helps when you're good at it, because then people want you around. Then you want to do it more, and then you get better at it. And so it was just this virtuous cycle of wanting to row, and wanting to hang out with other rowers. And I did the junior national team because I didn't want to be lonely over the summer. I wanted to go hang out with people who were even more like me. And that's how I ended up on the Olympic team, I guess. Just wanted a
Now,
place to belong.
I mean, I feel that too. Rowing for me took me out of a really dark place of loneliness as a kid.
Mm.
And and so I really empathize with that is, and for me, it was like I was doing field sports and I was like football and I played basketball. But were there other sports that you were doing too where rowing kind of took the center stage? Or was it just kind of that
Mm,
moment where you just got recruited and a little bit of like maybe inside information that I know just because I remember competing, with your brother trying to make a 97 junior
yeah,
team. So,
yeah.
the Davies rowing siblings were a known entity in my zeitgeist at the time. So was there something else that was trying to take your attention at first, and then rowing drew you in, or was it just rowing from the beginning?
I did all the sports and I was bad at most of them. Um, I did downhill skiing and the year before I started rowing, I actually got most improved at my club, but it was kind of like you used to be really bad and now you're just kind of bad. And I worked so hard. Like I really wanted to be good. And I did volleyball and tennis and softball and soccer, and I never did basketball. Um, and then yeah, I started rowing, and it just kind of for a while I tried to keep up with some of the other sports, but it eventually just kind of took over because, as we all know, it's a if you want to be good at it, you really have to do it year round. And it's funny you mentioned my brother, and I love like talking to people who know or knew my brother because I looked up to him so much. And when he went to try out for the junior team that summer, that was really when I realized that that was a possibility. And I knew I wanted to do it the next summer. It looked so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the junior team's a trip, right? It's you're sitting there, and I think the more awkward you may be in sports, and then you find rowing. And it was interesting talking to Bo recently because he wasn't a high school rower,
Mm,
and and he almost saw that being a high school rower is a deficit, because you have
mm,
so much kind of knowledge about it and you've had all this training and that jump to the junior team where, like you said, when you're good at something and you weren't, and all of a sudden it goes from like most improved to world's best of that age. What
mhm,
did that kind of start to change for you? Like, to get that acknowledgement that like you could not only be one of the best junior rowers in the country because it's the US junior team, but one of the best junior
mm,
rowers in the world. Because at the end of that camp, if you make it, you go to the world championships.
mhm. It's kind of addictive when you start to see that kind of success. And I saw myself through other people's eyes, and it felt good. And I just wanted more of that. And so I just worked even harder. And like I said, it's a virtuous cycle. Now, I think the most virtuous cycle is when you have the intrinsic motivation where you just really love what you're doing. And I did love what I was doing, but I also loved the approval that I got from other people. I'll be real.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so just with that, like, and like I'll be honest, like we're skipping really deep into it really fast, because I think we have a lot to cover. But
Mm,
that said, I think, we've heard from other people on the show, right? That, it was, hey, I was, and I mean, myself included, right? Like I was not a great athlete in anything. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm pretty good at this. And we've heard other people, Luke, who's on the screen, also told us about, his experience as a swimmer. And then he moved over to rowing, and all of a sudden things clicked, and, that was kind of working out. And so my question really goes back to the, like, um, you're in the high school rowing program, you're doing your national type program. Like, did you start to, like, I mean, and obviously you're hearing accolades, right? Because people are, to your point, you're seeing yourself through other people's eyes. It's addictive. You're starting to get like, oh, like I could be really good at this. So my question is, like, at that point, you're in high school. I'm not sure what year of high school this is. I'm assuming it's getting closer to your latter years in high school, where you're probably
mm,
starting to get recruited. You're starting to think about what's next. Um,
mhm.
my question though is, like, did you at that point be like, I could see myself doing this for a really long time, or was it just like, I just want to make the next step? Right. I just want to go to college and then we'll see. Or is it like, no, no, because we've heard other people be like, hey, I just wanted to keep doing it, versus other people that are like, I wanted to be an Olympian. I wanted to be an Olympian since I was 10 years old. Whatever. So didn't know where that stood in your spectrum of thought process at that point, if you can even remember. I mean, I know it was a long time ago.
I knew I wanted to keep doing it and make the senior national team, which of course is
Mhm.
ultimately the ultimate goal there is the Olympic team. I grew up in Ithaca, and there were a couple people there training for the Olympic team. So this was the late 90s, training for 2000.
Mhm.
Tom Murray was there training. He was coaching at Cornell. And then his then girlfriend, Whitney Post, was training for the lightweight team, and she ended up being my kind of coach slash training partner. And so I had people to look up to who were doing that, and I thought, well, I want to do that too.
Dude,
Nice.
that's awesome. T Murray, not big influence for me. Now we definitely got to get him on the show. Like, he's on the list of people I want. Um, he came uh after 2000 when he was done. He came to move to Boston. He was rowing out of Northeastern, and he took me under his wing in a pair a couple times.
Oh, nice.
And really kind of like let me know, he's like, hey, you could be good at this, right? And like having
Yeah.
someone who walked the walk tell you that you could be good, I think that's cool. So to have that
Yeah.
access to those type of athletes at that age is really cool. And the other thing I owe T Murray is I never would have met Carey probably if it wasn't for him. So he's
You never
responsible
what?
for my
Oh,
would have
you're
met
yes.
Carey. Yeah, yeah. So he's responsible for my marriage and 2 kids. So I'm very thankful to him.
Oh,
Um, yeah, I mean, Justin, like, thanks for, you're right. Like, there's so much awesome stuff to get into. And, so you're on the junior team, you're making your way to Radcliffe. And, at this point, do you feel like you knew you had this mindset? Did you, like, once you got to Radcliffe, did you like know that you had something that was different, or was the talent group at Radcliffe still close enough to your level, or were you part of that level? Was there anyone there that was still pushing you? Like, because one of the things that I find is really interesting as we've had these conversations is when everyone kind of gets that high performance mindset where they're just kind of like, you know what, I'm good at this,
mm.
and I want more. And you've kind of alluded to that already through each level, but what was it like at Radcliffe at that era where you were a bunch of fast oarswomen?
Mm. Well, Michelle Garrett was a junior when I started as a freshman, and she was fast, became even faster. And she kind of took me under her wing. She would call me Big One. And one day she just went, hey, Big One, let's go for coffee. And she just kind of was like, hey, man, we can do this. Like, I mean, I already had the goal of the national team, right? As did she. She had, had she already been on she'd been on an under 23 team, I think, at that point. So we would do extra workouts together. Uh, I'm smiling because I see a little one in the screen there. Anyway, we would do extra workouts together, and yeah, I think she really helped me kind of up my game. I remember doing an erg test, and she would always beat me on erg tests because she was stronger. But there's this one erg test that just went very poorly for her. It was a 6K, and she, with like, I don't know, 2K to go, she just blew up. She just like grunted. Let out this huge grunt, and then just like started pulling very slow splits for a little bit. And I was catching up. I was like, this is the day. This is the day I'm going to beat Michelle Garrett. And with 500 to go, she looks at my screen, lets out another grunt, and pulls like sub 130 for the last 500. I swear. Beats me by like 1 second. Oh man, but I did go. I went pretty fast because I thought I was so excited. This might be the day that I finally beat Michelle Grant. I don't think I ever beat her on the erg, but it was
I don't
great
think
to
many,
have that. Don't
yeah,
think many
many
people
people
have.
did.
Yeah,
Many people have, yeah.
it was great to have that caliber of athlete, and even I learned a lot even from the athletes who I could beat. I remember Holly Fling. She was just so tough. I mean, she was 5 foot nothing. No, I mean, obviously she's taller than that, but she was the shortest on the team, and just hard as nails, like crazy competitor. She taught me a lot too.
And do you think it was the fact that not only you, but Michelle, I mean, I don't know the rest of your teammates, but what do you think really helped galvanize that crew to be able to take it all that
And
season?
it wasn't that season. It actually wasn't until Michelle Girette, as I call her, graduated. So she graduated in '02 and we won NCAAs in '03.
Okay.
And it was interesting, like my freshman and sophomore year, we had on paper, we had very talented crews that we kind of like just never could get it together. We could never like wrap our heads around performing when it came time. And then my junior year, there was a group of seniors who got together and they were like, all right, this is our last chance. Like, we got to make this happen. And we'd lost a lot of talent. I mean, Michelle graduated but they were like, nope, we're just gonna band together as a team. And they kind of called everyone together at the beginning of the season and they were like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna win this thing, and here's how we're gonna do it. We're all gonna, help each other and whatever. And it was this rising tide that lifted all boats. It did not come top down. I mean, it did in that they were seniors, but these were not necessarily the fastest people on the team. It came from bottom up of just everybody working together. And I think that was a real good lesson for me on how to make a fast crew. It's not about individuals, it's about a team.
I mean, you are the expert in that now. So I mean, and that's crazy to think too, is like in this moment, you are being exposed to Olympians from the junior level to, super fast historical oarswomen like Michelle. Like you said, she was on the U23 team, but you're also making your way into the senior national team at this point as an undergrad. Because as you mentioned, as you corrected me, thank you for dates, 2003, in a short year later is the beginning of, like you said, trying to get to the senior team, which is the ultimate, the Olympics, and then you just never left. Like you might have had breaks, but for 3 in a row. So like at that point, at that NCAA championship, is that when you knew you had the mindset to keep going? Like that senior team level did it still feel distant to you at that point, or did it feel like it was within your grasp?
Definitely felt within my grasp. My first senior team was '02. And I actually I was a sophomore. I just finished my sophomore year. I started out at the under 23 pre-elite camp. And I still remember so at Radcliffe, we had this shirt that got kind of passed around and it was in the Dunkin' Donuts font. But it said, I'm going to help you out here, Steve, bleeping go nuts. And I just thought it was the greatest thing. So anyway, I'm wearing it at pre-link camp and Tom Terhar comes to introduce himself to all the campers. And he's giving a little speech and we're all gathered around in the boathouse and he's looking around and he just stops mid-sentence and points at me and says, if you get invited to Princeton, don't wear that shirt. And I was like, oh, okay. And I ended up getting invited to Princeton and I guess I didn't wear that shirt. But yeah, I had done well in the pair and I got invited to try out for the senior team.
So just a question with that, and we've had some of these same kind of discussions with others on the previous shows. Even though you were performing at a really high level, you obviously, let's say we're not being conceited, but we knew we had really strong talent, right? Like you knew you were talented. You're amongst, already very, very talented other teammates at Radcliffe. You've been in the camp program for a couple of years. When you did get to the senior team, this is the question I guess I'm asking in referencing maybe some of the other episodes we've had, is like, were your eyes like, whoa, I'm here, like all of a sudden, like I'm in a big pool now, right? Like, because I think that's been a theme that we've seen, and again, it may not be the same for everybody, but a lot of times it's like I was starstruck when I got there. It was like, oh, there's that person and that person, and like I'm in the same boat as them. And this is, myself, others, everybody on the screen has had similar experiences in different points in their rowing careers, even in their collegiate careers. But it's like you get there and you're like, okay, I haven't necessarily made it, but I've arrived, right? Like, did you have any of that kind of feeling or vibe when you're like, all right, I'm here, and now it's like all the oarswomen that I, as Caryn, looked up to, are now like sitting behind me or sitting in front of me, or we got the same, our hands on the same shell. So just didn't know if that was a thing that crossed your mind, or if it was just like, I'm here, I got my blinders on, I'm just going to keep pulling hard and see what happens. Because again, you talked about like hanging out with your friends, right? And it was all part of the camaraderie, but I just wasn't sure if you got there and you're like, ooh, okay, yeah, this is new. This feels like a new challenge to go conquer.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember that somewhere. I think so I was able to ease into it because I got invited. I mentioned that I had been at the pre-elite camp. My pair partner and I got invited to come down to Princeton. And for the first couple weeks, we were rowing the pair, so not in the direct selection mix. I think we were just kind of like getting to feel things out.
Sure.
And it really helped that I knew some people on the senior team, because Michelle Garrett was on the senior team and kind of, again, took me under her wing, introduced me on. So I kind of got integrated right away. And I had a feeling that I could hang.
Okay.
So I just was like, I'm here and I want to go fast like everybody else.
Okay. Yeah, no, fair enough. Because I asked that question because we've seen, and I think that it's different for everyone. There's different juxtapositions that people have when they get to that elite environment, right? And Dan and set up the show, right? It's the 0.001%, right? And so if you think about every oarswoman in the country, right? There's only 40, 50, women who are there at any one time. So I think that the reason I'm asking is there's people we've talked to, even with tons of talent, that have been like, yeah, like I didn't know if I was gonna make a boat. Like I was just like following orders. I was just doing what I was told. I was just trying to get my blade in the water, whatever it may be. Versus others that are like, no, I was there to take names and make sure my bell ball was in front. So yeah, just I was curious about that. And I think the other piece that I have there is if you could take us through, like, it doesn't have to be that first summer, but just as you start to go from collegiate national champion to, okay, now I'm preparing to go race. I'm going through selection, and then I'm gonna, go race in the 8 at the Olympics. Like, what does that mindset shift feel like, if it feels like anything different? Or, because we've had people, Carolyn talked about, like, the calmest I was rolling up to the line. Like, it was like a non-event. Like, versus you have other people that are like, I was shitting my pants. So, like, just curious as to kind of how that transition happened, because obviously you locked in, and we talked about in your bio, you locked in, and you didn't unlock for a long time, right? As far as being locked into that mindset. So just curious on that, of where that shift happened, if it did happen at all, if it was just like, it's just another day, another stroke.
There was a lot there.
I know.
I want to go back to what you were talking about first, which was like, when you first walked in, what was your attitude? It all felt like incremental steps. I don't think I ever had this moment of like, holy shit, that was a lie. I had the weirdest moment where I showed up. This would have been 03. The Radcliffe went to Henley, so I showed up late to selection camp in 03. And I literally just like, I had just gotten to town, like drove straight to the boathouse, got out of the car. The women had already gotten on the water, but the men had not yet left. And Mike Tatey was like, hey, I need another person to row pair. And I ended up going out in a pair with Brett Newland. I was like, well, I guess I'm here. that was fun. Obviously, I got pulled around.
It's a good
But
precursor to Oxford.
yeah, exactly, right. That's how I knew how to do that. But that was actually my second summer. The first summer, I don't know, it just sort of like it was all baby steps, and there was no one step that felt like, oh my God. Except for one. I keep remembering things. I actually, before I went to pre-elite camp, I got invited down to Princeton. Tom called me and asked me to come race a pair in the NSR because he needed, one of the women needed a pair partner. It was Michelle Giller, not to be confused with Michelle Garrett. And I had actually never raced a pair before, but I was like, sure. So I drove down and I showed up, and Tom was like, here's your pair partner, here's the boat, go race. And we raced the heat, and I think we made the B final. And then in the final, I was steering again. I had never steered before, but like somehow figured it out, except halfway through the race, my steering foot actually came off the foot plate. Like the bolt, came off. And so I think we were winning until that happened, and then we slowed down, and I don't even think we got last in that race, but yeah, it wasn't anything special. And afterwards, Tom gave me a dressing down because he was like, you should have checked the boat before you went out. And in retrospect, I was like, yeah, I guess it was kind of loose, like in training, but I thought that was how steering was supposed to be. Like, I don't know. So I just was like, oh. And that was my introduction to the national team. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I didn't do a good job, but all right. And then when I got invited back, at least I knew to check my bolts before racing.
That that is such a brutal but accurate way of like, yeah, oh, you want to do this? Check your bolts, right? Like it comes down to sometimes those things are so simple, or that much autonomy, or that much, you come into it wide-eyed thinking like, oh, it's going to be this supportive, nurturing environment because I'm young. And it's like, nope. You think
Yeah.
you're good. I think that's the thing that I loved and hated about my early years on the national team was it didn't matter. Didn't matter where you came from, didn't matter what your erg was, didn't matter what your resume was, didn't matter what your pedigree was. It was, are you good enough on the day?
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was like, that to me was a really hard lesson to learn, because to come from kind of being the best through high school and college, and then just having such a stark wake up call of like, oh, everybody here is the best. I think for me, it wasn't really until kind of 03 that I kind of was like, okay, now I'm getting my feet under, I'm getting my sea legs on the national team. So we have so much often like awesome things to cover. I don't want to rush you. I love that you're remembering stuff. That's really cool. So if you want to go on any tangent, like this is your show, not ours. We'll always have you back on. So I also don't want to rush it for the audience because there's so much. But I gotta know for me, because I was there watching it as a super fan. But what was it like to beat the Romanian women for the first time in forever in that heat in 04? Like that was legendary right away.
Yeah.
That was legendary right away. Because like, Luke, I don't know how much you remember as being kind of the outsider, because when you're in it and you're at the games and you have a mission and you have a chance to medal, win, etc., you're kind of really in this bubble of outside noise. But from the outside, I just remember like you had the Romanian women in that heat, and it was like a real good gut check. There was a world, you had a world champion. The women's 8 had a world championship win from 02. 03, an amazing comeback in the final to qualify the boat and make sure it was qualified. So I'm just thinking, like, from the fan standpoint, sitting in those stands, watching you women line up, and then seeing history be made in that moment was just so cool. So I'd love to know a little bit about that heat, if you can, again, remember.
Yeah. I guess I'm trying to remember back. So we had, as you pointed out, beaten Romania in '02. I think Romania was in that race. It all fades. Um,
I mean, when you beat everybody so many times, Caryn.
there were some other people in the race. Yeah, we knew Romania was fast, and we our kind of race strategy slash um temperament, just the way we raced is we would get off the line hard. And so we were just trying to put as much distance between us and them as we could. And we were almost the length up at the 1,000. And the thing about international racing is, and that's one of the difference between, I think, collegiate racing and international racing. If you get a length up in college, like, yeah, they're probably not coming back. But no one's given up in international racing. And they came back at us hard, and it might have been a photo finish. It was a matter of hundredths of a second. So that felt pretty good, but we were also very aware that easily, three more strokes and they probably would have had us. So that was very nerve-wracking going into the final, and sure enough, they did get us.
I did. And it must be so tough. Like I mean, it must be so tough having your legacy to reflect upon, right? There is a lot of awesomeness that comes in. There's a lot of struggles that come through that too. Um, what what did it again from the outside, like getting a silver in the women's 8 was historic at that moment, right? Like it had been a long
Mm-hmm.
time, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like you had a great race against great competitors. I think at that time there was a Romanian women's pair that were doubling up, and they won the women's pair too, and so that was, I think, you pushed them so hard that they had to change that tactic too going into future regattas. But what was it like
No.
standing on that podium, as a younger member of that boat,
Mm.
but now like you're now amongst the legends, right? You're in the pantheon of Olympic women at that early stage. Like, what did it feel like for you?
It was honestly bittersweet because we knew we had a chance at gold, right? And we weren't able to pull it off. So we were happy that we had gotten a medal. Um, and we felt like, right, maybe there's some unfinished business here. Uh, and I didn't realize how much I had felt the pressure of being so close to gold until after we crossed the line. And I like just blurted out, it's over. And I realized the reason I said that was like, it had been weighing on me so heavily, that pressure. And it was just like this release of like, okay, now it's over. There's no more pressure. And then immediately I was like, but I don't want it to be over. Like there's unfinished business. Um, Having said that, it was wonderful the best part for me of that entire regatta was standing on the medal stand. I think it was just before we received our medals. We got to watch the men's race go down, and we got to watch them win. And I just felt so much genuine happiness for them, watching them win, that made me feel a lot better in that moment about not having won ourselves.
So, with that, okay, so you could, I mean, amazing, right? And I think it's really interesting, right? I think that so often elite athletes are perceived as just like very robotic, like they're machines and they could do it and what have you. Like you're talking about the realness, right? Like there's like an endorphin pressure valve release of like it's over, like thank God, right? But then there's the immediacy that you mentioned of like now I know what it's like. I want more, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
can you just take us through though that and we're jumping time here, but comes to '08, same position, you're in a final, you have a chance to win a gold medal. You have a different crew. It's not all the same women. What's that experience like? Like in the ability to say like, all right, like just the mindset changes. I think it's important for the audience to understand, like we've talked about this with some of the guys that were in that '04 boat, that were like, hey, like we knew if we did this, like it's ours, right? And I think that did you guys and have that mindset too when you got to '08? You're like, all right, we know what it takes to get a silver. Like if we execute XYZ, we are not going to be beaten today. Like, so just we think it's cool. We've had folks on the show put us in the seat, right? Put us in the boat and be like, hey, this is what was going on as we were going down the course for the one time every 4 years to go win a gold medal. I think it'd be really cool if you could just share with us, like, either the the '08 experience or the 12 experience of like, this is what went down. This is what it was like to go win a gold because we knew we could do it.
Yeah, that sounds pretty accurate. I want to take
There's
you back
knowing and then
to
there's executing. I think that there's two different things.
right. Yeah. Well, the knowledge that if you execute,
Right.
that you know how to execute, right?
Mhm.
And I think that for me, the mindset was a big difference between '04 and '08. '04, it was like, what's going to happen? Can I do this? I mean, yeah, I was a little bit afraid. Like, what's, can we pull this off? Am I good enough? Am I good enough? I guess really that it comes down to that. Am I good enough? Didn't know if I was good enough. I guess in the end
No,
I
sure.
wasn't.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Absolutely.
Yeah. But that's a whole nother thing. Hanging your worth on your performance, but let's put that aside.
I'm laughing not at you. I'm laughing at mostly myself because it's I mean, not to mention it's the week of the Olympics, right? Like, so there's it's a lot of emotion, and it's I want to hear you talk about I feel all the feels, right? Because it's like, hanging your worth on that one moment. Am I good enough? I'd like, just for the audience and maybe for myself and for all those athletes that are racing right now, is like, you're fucking good enough, right? You are worth everything. Making it there, being the person in the arena is worth it. So, I know, Justin, I think you said it well, is like, executing it and did you execute it is really important from separating it. Like, are you worth it? Or is this, it's really hard not to. I think you have to wrap yourself up in the self-worth of it. But at the same time, it's like, it is the Olympics and winning does matter. And we go there to win it. And if you're good enough to win it and you don't, then you're not good enough. And that's a real fucking, it's a mind place to be in. That's really tough, that I want to make sure that the audience that's listening, and if, any athletes that are racing, if for some reason you're listening, which I hope you're not, because you should be racing, is you are worth it. Who you are as a person, your courage to put yourself out there is worth it. And like, same thing, 2004, Caryn, you are worth it.
So yeah, just to go back though.
Sorry, Justin. I get a little emotional.
It's okay. And I agree, right? Like, again, like there's only so many people, there's only so many seats, right? And we've talked about it on other episodes, like you have to beat your best friend to get there, right? And that's part of the contract you sign when you do it, right? Sometimes. But I think what I wanted to get at, Caryn, was like the swagger. Like, I want to understand the swagger of that particular 4 years or that race or just that mindset, because I think that we want what we'd love to get for the audience. And again, just going back to where you were saying, like, you want to make sure that you're being compassionate and you're helping people understand your story. I would just love to understand, like, you were the, you know, I correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you stroked that boat, in 08,
Mm.
right? So, you know, every seat's important. Obviously, a stroke seat's is an interesting position to be in. By the way, Dan was my stroke for when we were in college, so we have this little, you know, twin language bond. But that said, I just want to understand the swagger, you know, if there was something to it, right? Where you're just like, we are here and we are not going home with a silver medal this time. Like, I just didn't know if that was the mindset, or you're just like, we got this. We're gonna go do what we do, and we're gonna win. I don't know if it was that easy or not.
I'm gonna come back to that because I
Okay.
do want to acknowledge what Dan said.
Of
'cause I
course.
lost it.
Sorry.
I get cut off all the time, so don't worry about it.
That's one of the biggest and most important lessons that I've learned over the years is if you weren't enough without the gold medal, you're not going to be enough with
Yeah. Cool runnings, baby.
it. Someone once said to me, if I were you, I would never have a bad day. I would put on all my Olympic medals and I would stand in front of the mirror and I'd be like, you're amazing. And when he said that to me, I felt profoundly sad. Because I was like, I wish it worked that way. I thought it worked that way. I wanted it to work that way. And it doesn't. It's like, it's about, you feel that way for about 2 weeks. And then you're back to being the same person with all the insecurities and fears and uncertainties that you had before. Except for now you have this thing in your sock drawer that other people think makes your, enough, but you still don't feel like enough. So you got to figure out some other way to feel like enough. Okay, swagger.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're enough. Group therapy session here.
Do you keep it in your sock drawer too? Is
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
Are they all in the same sock, or they have each other own sock?
They each have their own sock, but then they're all in the same little pouch.
Perfect. Yeah.
And I never
That's
wear
like-
all 3 of them at once because it's too heavy and they clang together.
Love it. Love it.
All right, now I am going to actually get to your question, Justin, but I'm going to answer it with a story.
Of course, yeah, sure.
So it's like July of 2008. It's a few weeks before we leave for the games. And we're doing some race pieces, and Tom's got out his stopwatch and he's timing us. I think we're doing thousands. And he's like, all right, guys, take it back to the dock. I'll meet you in the Sykes room. You guys all know where that is. It's, the upstairs meeting room at the Princeton Boathouse. So we all gather upstairs, and Tom walks in and he just shakes his head. He's like, guys, this isn't good enough. These times that you are going for these race pieces are not going to get you a gold medal. It's not good enough. So y'all need to figure out what you're going to do between now and the time we leave for Beijing to get faster, to find that extra speed that you need. And we were all just like, just like eyes down, heads hanging, like, oh no, like what have we done? What are we going to do? Now that I look back on it, I wonder if it was just, I wonder if he was just messing with us, but anyway, whatever. I think he posted the times. I assume he posted them correctly. Anyway.
But the worst part about it is that he still could have just made fake times.
That's true. I know, like, it's just, I don't know.
Now that I've coached too, it's like, it's a tactic. It could work.
Oh man. So wow. Anyway, we got told we weren't enough. And we were just shocked. And so the meeting ended and people kind of filed out of the room. And I just sat there staring out the window for, I don't know, another 20 minutes because I was in the stroke seat and I felt somehow responsible. Like something I'm doing isn't enough here. And if I'm setting the rhythm for this boat, like there must be something that different that I can do to help us go faster. And I realized I had this, I really think this is a day that I went from being a good stroke to a really great stroke, because I realized that what I was doing that wasn't enough was I was rowing 1,000-meter piece the fastest I could row it. I was not rowing 1,000-meter piece in a way that meant it was the fastest the boat could row it. And I realized that if I wanted this boat to get to the kind of speed that we needed, I was going to have to do a fly and die. Like I was going to just have to like empty the tank from stroke one and kind of hope that people pick up on that energy and carry my lifeless body across the finish line, because I was not going to be able to keep that up for the full 2,000 meters or however long the piece was that we were doing. Yeah, so I was like, I'm going to have to martyr myself here, because this is what this boat needs. And my job is not to row my best race. It's to help the people behind me row their best race. So I just started doing that in training sessions and people kind of picked up on it. Eric Faro was like, Jesus, like what happened? Like the next piece we did, she was like, you shot out of there. Like I couldn't keep up. But yeah, we started getting a much more crushing solid rhythm. And I was like, all right, this is the new normal. This is just how it's gonna have to go. So fast forward to Beijing, I was afraid, but in a different kind of way. Like in Athens, I was afraid of like, am I good enough? Are we good enough? And Beijing, I was like, I know we're good enough, but this is gonna hurt real bad. And I just need to like hold on, like just make sure that my oar keeps going in and out of the water in that last 500, because I don't know what's gonna happen. And that's pretty much how the race went. Like we took commanding lead of the race, and it was like I knew that as long as we executed, I mean, kind of an answer to your question, Justin, like similarly to the other people who performed well, like I just knew that if we executed what we knew how to do, we would win. It just comes down to doing it. And I was like, man, it's gonna hurt a lot. And when I never knew that Caroline had a similar like
Yeah.
pact
Yeah,
with
she
herself
talked about
London.
it. She's like,
I
hope
was just
hang
about to
on.
ask that. Like
Yeah.
who got you guys to the line then? If
Yeah,
everybody
'cause
had the same
everybody just
mentality,
start-
like
I hope
start
I
the
hope
rest of the
everybody
boat.
else
Start
is
pairs
pairs
out.
out for me. Yeah.
Everyone's like, yeah,
Start
she's got it.
She's got it.
Somehow.
Who's got it?
So-
Who's holding the ball? Yeah.
I don't think I did quite that same. Yeah, it wasn't quite like that in London. So I guess we just chose different years to fall apart in the last 500. And I'm really in the last like 250. I had the thought, I don't know what's going to happen first. Either the finish line is going to come and we're going to cross it in first, or I will pass out. I don't know which one of those is going to happen first. Thankfully, it was the finish line. And I couldn't even celebrate. Like we crossed the line, and Caroline, who was behind me, like launched herself and tried to hug me. And I just went, don't touch me. Because I don't know. I was in so much physical pain. I couldn't stand being touched. But yeah, so, and also Tom, he's really brilliant at like pre-race prep. He made this speech. So we had won 2 world championships at that point, 06, 07, and won at least 1 World Cup leading into Beijing. And he made this pre-race speech where he basically said, all right, guys, like this is like any other race. You just go out and you do what you always do. Which made sense because we were winning, we always won. So like just go out and do what you always do. And we
And
were
you set a
like,
world
yeah,
and you set a world record in that time.
yeah.
07. 07, you
Oh
had the world
yes, we
record.
did. Oh six. It was in 06.
06, yes, 06.
In Eton Dorney. So yeah, we were all like, yeah, that makes total sense. Uh-huh. So we were like, all right, this is gonna be fun, and my form of swagger is to be really goofy. Just to be like dancing around and just silly. I never tried to be intimidating because I think that's risky. Because if you, well, first of all, I liked the people we were racing against. Like I was friends with a lot of the people on other teams, and it just felt weird to like try to intimidate your friends. But also if you do something to try to intimidate someone, you're like, right, whatever. And then they just look at you and they're like, all right, you want to go? Like, all right. You just gave someone a reason to beat you.
More
Like,
motivation,
don't give
sure.
someone a reason to beat you. So I was always a little goofy, always trying to like maybe look less intimidating. And that also made me less nervous. So anyway, we go up to the line and then we won. And Tom met us back at the dock and he said, I'm going to help you out again, Steve. You won't have to bleed this out. He said, remember what I said about this being just another race? That was a lie. This is the bleeping Olympics, and you just won a bleeping gold medal. And we all just looked around like, he lied. Oh, well.
Yeah. I, it's really cool to hear that because we didn't get to watch your race, right? That time, Steve and I were racing, so we're having our own interesting race, and probably similar to your experience in 04, which is coming across that line and not having the gold and kind of having to sit with it for a moment until you start getting to the podium. But there's actually it's one of my favorite pictures. It was a picture like our 15 minutes of fame when like people want your autograph and stuff, and so it was a picture that Shivani Palmer took of me that she printed out a whole bunch of them for me to sign at something, and it's me with my hand on my heart at your gold medal ceremony to the national anthem, and I remember you winning, right? Your boat winning gave me that similar feeling I think that you described in 04, which is like, man, I'm so happy for them.
Yeah.
It's their, in a lot of ways it's like it's their time. It's their time to be up there. It's their time to get the attention. And to just be supportive and like, so in a lot of ways that win, selfishly for me allowed me to do what I always wanted to do, was like hold my hand on my heart at the Olympics, listening to our national anthem. So, having teammates like you, and I think that's a really interesting thing that I'd love to talk a little bit about going into 12, since that's where we are, is, we went out to Chula Vista, and I think that hurt us on the men's team. Like I remember in 01 was a really unique experience because the men and women trained together, and all the like lightweight, scullers, sweep, everybody was together, and that carried into 08. And so I think we've talked about this a little bit too, is like having a large group does help if managed the right way. And as we went out to 12, things got weird on the men's side, but you women stayed in Princeton and you had that consistency, and you had Tom, like we switched coaches. Mike moved on to Cal and Tim came in, and there was a rough transition. They moved the training center around, but to me, as a coach, I always started looking at the deltas, right? The 1% of marginal gains and losses of what creates more success or less success after something is successful. And man, did you women capitalize on 08? Like, did you really just rocket ship the women's national team into this whole new echelon of what was possible? So you now go from being and what seems like to most people, like 8 years for most people seems like a long time. For Olympians, it's like a day, like once you commit to that next 4 years, especially if you love it. So going into London and we're packing in this 12-year experience of just the Olympic cycles. Do you mind sharing with us, if possible, like what was there a moment where you, yeah, Dougie, look at him,
Oh my goodness.
editor in chief. I know it's like that's why we love this podcast, because this is
I
us, right?
don't edit it. Don't
don't-
edit it
don't-
out. Yeah.
Oh no, we
Don't
won't.
you
No,
have
no.
we're not gonna edit it.
Aren't your like
Okay,
niece
great.
and doesn't your brother have twins, Caryn?
Yes.
So you've seen what it's like.
Oh yeah, man. It's tough. So those guys
Well-
are twins. All right. Yeah.
Now that I'm unmuted, right? Like this is my opportunity here. Dan, I'm gonna say for me in 08, it was fun. I also put my hand over my heart, but I think Shivani liked you more than me. So you were the one in the photo. Thank you. But my thought was just thank God somebody won.
Oh.
It was like simple. I was so happy for you guys, but it was also like thank God. And I'm just gonna pause right there and just leave it there.
No, this is real life, man. Olympians raising kids. So that ramble is, if you, I would love to know, was there ever a moment where you thought like I'm done, or was there a moment where?
Yeah, that was the question I was
Yeah,
gonna have. Is
yeah,
like you let out this like primal scream. You recalled, right? Years later, you're recalling. You let out this primal scream when you got silver, because it was like, all right, like the pressure valve got opened.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a relief in the next one when you won gold? You're like, finally, it's happened. Like, obviously you let yourself go into a very deep pain cave, right? Which, again, is obviously a trait of very high performing mindsets and elite athletes, right? But I just want to understand, like, was there a relief of like, I knew we could do this? Like, it was like, so I guess the question I have is, was it a relief, or was it a like exuberance of excitement? Like, it,
I would describe it a little bit like stepping into a warm bath.
okay.
You just after
Like,
I got
ah.
over the discomfort, pain,
Sure.
it just sort of like just this warm, kind of relaxed feeling, like, oh yeah, we did it. That
Yeah.
thing that I've been training for, which is different. London was different. London was like, oh, thank God we didn't mess this up. Right. And that's kind of sad when you win an Olympic gold medal and your first thought is, oh, thank God I didn't mess this up. Yeah, London, the London cycle felt very different. So when I get together and reminisce with athletes from the 08 era, we all agree, like, that was the best. That was the best cycle, man. We were all together and we were having a great time, and like everyone was friends, and just like never to be repeated. It was never the same after that.
We messed up in 08. We had a bad regatta, right? It's like, especially as a coach, and kind of these talks have really helped to get memories out from all different angles. And that's a whole separate podcast of like the whys and what could have been done different. And rumination can lead to a dark place, right? I know from experience. So like, it's not about ruminating, but it's but to me, that's what's also really important, is there weren't a lot of mess ups for the women, especially at the world stage in that time. And so from the outside, it looked really easy. It really did. And things were just clicking along. And I think you can look to a lot of reasons why there was that success, but because it was so successful, it was also brutal. I definitely remember when we trained in Chula at times together, like seeing, it's hard when you see your friends suffer. And I just like not to go too much into that, but like, what was I would love to know if you're willing to share what was your darkest moment. Like mine was in '08 in Clemson, where things were going well and I almost felt like quitting, and I don't know why. Like I had to call a lifeline to my best friend that had nothing to do with rowing and talk me out of it. Right. So,
Mm.
um, and I'm a highly emotional person, right? So I've learned in this talking to everybody, like I'm on the extreme in some ways of being emotional. I hit it really well, I think, sometimes, but
Huh.
I'd love to know, like, what was what was a moment where you were just like, I don't know if I can do this, and what you did to get yourself through it? Because to me, it's a lot of like sharing that with our young audience that are just starting their rowing careers, or they're in college, or they're in high school, or they're just making their national team and they think it's too much. And
Mm.
it's just like, well, no, it's not. You got more in you. And I remember learning that lesson for myself. And it's one of my fondest memories of turning that vulnerability and resilience into a
Mm.
resilience. But I would love to know if you have one, or not, because Hoopman had none.
Man, I don't know if that's good or bad. Because like you, it's actually I think one of my like fondest rowing memories, other than the '08 era. Um, so it actually happened just in the last few years, when I was training for Tokyo. So I came out of retirement in 2019. Like the seed was planted in 2018. That summer I started rowing more, partially because I wasn't really happy with my job and I just was like trying to figure myself out. Started getting out more in a single, and I remember rowing under the BU bridge, and Charlie Butt was going by in his launch, and he gets out his megaphone and he goes, "Caryn, are you training for Tokyo?" And he didn't even wait for my response. He just said, "You should. You love rowing, and rowing loves you." And at that point, I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And I started like doing some erging, and I got in touch with Tom and Laurel down in Princeton. And I was like, "Okay, so what erg scores do I have to pull to get invited back?" And then they told me, and I was like, "Okay, I think I can do that." Um, so yeah, so I came out of retirement, but I knew I was old, and I knew I was slow compared. I mean, yeah, I hit the minimum erg standard, right? But I was still the slowest, right? When I got invited to the training center. So I was like, I might not make the team, right? This might be the first time ever that I don't make the team, which is kind of crazy when I think about that. Um, I never had to deal with disappointment like that ever in my life. So I chose my goals really carefully. I was like, what do I want out of this next year, knowing that it might end in disappointment? And I said, all right, I've been rowing now for like over 20 years. I want to learn something new. I want to learn something about myself. I want to learn something about rowing. I want to learn like something, just something, right? Like I want this to be an educational experience. And I also said, I want to be a really great teammate. I want to be the best teammate I could be. And that was partially strategic because I knew that going back to that story I told about Beijing, right? What made me so good as a stroke was that I helped other people perform better. It was not about me, it was about my teammates. And I'll be real, I would have never had any of the success that I've had in the single. Like I am not that good a rower. I just happen to like be a good, teammate. So I wanted to be a good teammate. Yeah, those are my two goals. And I arrived in Princeton, and I like, went down to the boathouse, and I was like, "Hey guys, like how's it going?" I felt like the new kid in kindergarten. And I was intimidated, man, in a way. Justin, to answer your question, in a way that from like way back, in a way that I had never been before. Like before I showed up and I was like about the same speed as other people, felt like I fit in. This
Mhm.
time I was like, "Oh man, I don't even know if I belong here." Like these women are fast, like faster than we
So I
were
have
back.
to, I have to imagine though, I, I don't know how to say this without sounding like goofy. Like I think that the opposite is going on. If I'm just sitting, I'm a fly on the wall. They're seeing you come in and they're like, "Oh shit! Like, there's one less seat. Like, she's back.
Probably,
Like,
probably, yeah.
legend has arrived." Like, I mean, I would have to. I don't care what your age is, right? If you're invited back and you're there and you have 20 years of experience, like, there's a lot to be said for that. So I have to imagine that that had to also be very intimidating for the other women on the other side of the table. I would have to imagine, right? Because it's like, oh, like you're, we've re-entered the chat. But I think, yeah, that's super interesting to hear you say that, right? I think that that also goes to a lot of what we like to talk about on the show is just like expectations, and I think that you did a really nice job explaining like theories of incrementality of, hey, I have these little, specific goals. I'm not trying to be audacious. I just want to hit these milestones, which I think some people look to say, if I don't hit a home run ball, and this is again more for the audience, if I don't hit this home run ball, I don't knock it out of the park, I don't win a gold medal, I don't, make the 8, and I wind up in a different boat or whatever it may be, then I failed, right? Versus like, no, like you still got the stuff to go be in the conversation. I think that that's a really good lesson that people can get out of this particular conversation is just like set attainable goals, but then obviously have stretch goals that are out there. So I think it's really important that you express that in a really clear way. So thank you.
And when you
Go ahead.
set your goals, you have to make sure that they're within your control. I think winning
Sure.
gold medal is kind of a bad goal. Like, we all had it. Sometimes it worked out, but that's not really within your control. There are things you can do to get there, but
Sure.
on the day, you can't control the other boats and how fast they go. So, anyway, going back to my story. I was really intimidated, and I think you're right, Justin, that they were probably intimidated too, which is probably why I had trouble making friends. Right?
Right.
I know they were being on the HPC.
Oh, yeah. Oh my goodness. There's a whole nother level there. Anyway, so I was like, okay. And I figured, all right, here's what worked for me in past. If I just put my head down and work hard and perform, then I will be accepted. Like, if I just start going fast, then I will be accepted, and I will get to step into that mentorship role that I envisioned for myself when I thought about being a good teammate. And that didn't happen. I felt really uncomfortable. I felt I couldn't really relate to my teammates. I never felt accepted. I didn't feel like I belonged. That was a really hard year. I got a lot faster. That is, I did get faster. But I was miserable. And then COVID happened. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this for another year. Like, I am so unhappy. And I almost quit many times. But what kept me going was partially my partner Lou, who kept reminding me that I had these goals, and the idea that, hey, you know what? Like, I didn't do a very good job at the goals that I had set for myself, but I get a do-over. Like, I decided that COVID year was a do-over. Like, I get to wipe the slate clean and start this year again and do a better job. And I thought, all right, so what am I going to do differently? Like, I don't know. Why is this not working? Why am I not able to be this mentor on the team that I wanted to be? So I called everyone in that training center over that COVID summer, called everyone, and I asked one question. I said, what can I do to be a better teammate to you? Those are some of the hardest conversations I've ever had. The least helpful conversation, but also the one that I think was one of the hardest, was, I won't say who it was, but she said to me, I've known you for 15 years and I have nothing good to say about you.
Oh, shit.
And I was like, okay, thanks for that. But that didn't actually answer my question, which is, what can I do to be better? We've established that you think I suck. But what can I do to be better? And she told me that she didn't like me because she thought I'd never earned my place, that I didn't belong. I hadn't earned my place in the London boat. and that I should tell Tom that I should get seat raced more. And I was like, all right. Called Tom, said, Tom, I've been told that I need to earn my place and you need to seat race me more. And I'm just passing this along. He kind of laughed and he was like, I would bet my house that you were you were the best person to stroke that London boat. And you definitely earned that place, but like, okay, fine. So I was like, thank you. So yeah, that was not a particularly helpful conversation, but I had some really difficult and helpful conversations. And the one that sticks out to me was with Liv Coffey. She said, I want you on this team. I think you can make this boat faster. But here's why people don't like you. We think that the way you act, we think you act entitled. We think that you walk around like you're just going to make this team and you don't have to try. And I was like, man, that is so interesting, because the way I was coming across was not at all what was going on inside my head. Inside my head, I was afraid. I was like, I don't know if I can handle the training. I'm always tired. I'm I'm not winning seat races. I'm not performing like, I'm in the bottom half on all our erg tests, whatever. And so I kind of felt like I hadn't earned the right to be part of the group, but that distance they saw as aloofness. So I really changed how I showed up after that. I started to be a lot more open and a lot more vulnerable about how I was feeling, how hard it was for me, how scared I was, how, just like how difficult it is, because it's difficult for everybody. And that's something we can all bond over. And things started to change. I started to step into that role that I had imagined for myself, where people would start coming to me for advice, like, hey, here's what I'm going through. I know you've been through a lot. Like, what do you think? And yeah, everything just turned around until I got injured. I hurt my shoulder doing yoga of all things in January of 2021. While we were at Chula Vista, and I ended up out of the boat for 3 months. I was on the exercise bike for 3 months. And part of that was I couldn't get an MRI, so I couldn't get diagnosed for like 2 months because of COVID and whatever. And I would I'd just be on the bike in the back of that bay in Chula Vista, just like thrashing myself, like sweat pouring down my face, just like really trying to make it clear, like, I am in it, guys. Like, I'm here, I'm with you, I'm doing this. And I would watch, people file into the boat bay and pick up the boat and walk out into the California sunshine. And I just felt like I was watching my dream of making another Olympic team recede into the distance. And so again, I almost quit, like, so many times. I cried a lot. Like, there was many times when people came, like, after I thought everyone had gone up to dinner, like, I'd cry alone in the locker room, and I think I'm gonna cry just talking about it. And occasionally people would, come back to get something and see me and be really kind. So that was really hard. But the reason I didn't quit was I knew that by staying there and being part of that team, I could still make a difference and still support people and make that team faster, whether or not I ended up on it when the team was selected. So I ended up getting back on the boat, but I wasn't fast enough. Lost too much rowing specific fitness. So back in Princeton, when we were going through selection, the day came that I knew it would. Tom said, all right, step into my office. And he said, well, I think you know what I'm going to say. And I was like, yeah, I do. I'm going home. And he said, he said, yeah, you're cut, basically. That I expected him to say that, but he said something that I didn't expect. He said, a lot of the women who are going to make this team for Tokyo don't yet know, they may never know what it means to be a true Olympian. But you've showed with your actions over these last few months, with your support of this team, that you are a true Olympian. And with that, I walked out, and I was just trying not to cry. And I walked past the group of women who were going to be the 8. They were stretching, getting ready to go out in the boat in the E. And I didn't even look at anybody. I just picked up my bag and walked away, because I knew that if I did, I would cry, and I just could not deal with it right at that moment. And I spoke to Liv later, and she said, when you did that, when you picked up your bag and just walked away and you didn't say goodbye to anybody, I thought to myself, is this really how Caryn Davies ends her rowing career? This is not how it should end. But that wasn't how it ended, at least not in my mind, because over the next few days and weeks, I got messages from a lot of, I would even say most of the people on that team, just saying, hey, man, thanks for being such a good teammate. Thanks for making me a better athlete. Thanks for listening. Thanks for offering your help. One woman said, I couldn't have made it through this year without you. And getting those messages, I realized that I had actually won something more important than an Olympic gold medal, and that was the trust and respect and even the love of teammates.
Dude.
You're like saying it for us, like tying it all together with a bow.
Card. I mean, you're obviously a winner, right? You're obviously a winner. But what you're more than anything is you're a fucking champion. You are the definition of a champion. And we are so lucky to have you in our sport. We really are. And you just articulated so well the kind of full circle of this conversation, which has been amazingly impactful to me. So much of what you've shared, I have felt, and I thought I was alone. And it's just refreshing to know that I'm not and we're not. But your resiliency and what you're doing now, word compassion, right, comes back, and it's like what you are showing is compassion with yourself, to share that and to be vulnerable and to show that you're making it your next resiliency. It's no wonder why you're choosing to practice law the way you are. God, that was amazing. Thank you. I mean, you're confirming something in my head, that a true champion, if you're really a champion, like, winners go out with a win, champions go out on their shield. Like, there's just no other way. Like, if you're going, you're going to fight until there's no fight left in you, and someone's got to take you out, and then you just redirect that fight. And it's obvious that you're redirecting it, and it's awesome to see. It's really awesome to see. I mean, that's so impactful. I have one more question that I'd love to ask, but that was such a beautiful story. I just want to make sure that Luke or Justin or Steve, do you guys have any follow-up?
Well, I got one thing, and I've been sitting on it for a little bit as I'm listening to Caryn's story, and now I'm off mute and it's quiet over here for a minute. I got to get it out, right? It's Caryn. It's like something that like I saw in you, and I kind of moved on, and shifted gears where I was, came back to Princeton after London on the coaching side and was kind of afar of the group. But something I saw in you in, let's say it was like 07. I think your ability to just like deal with that, like stuff like that, or deal with a bad day and just, say, okay, like I remember you were having some party one night and you came over to the house late and you're like, Steve, I just had a really bad day. Can you just, I just need to go in the corner and dance for a little bit and just process and then I'll be okay. And just, I was just like, okay. So I put some music on and you went and danced and, and processed and then joined the party. And we're like, all right, let's go. Like, and, I think that to me, like from afar, I've seen that as like your superpower where like, sometimes you just had to like just process for a little bit and take all that in and then just say, okay, all right, so let's go. Like, and I always thought that though, like just from afar, I always thought that like not getting too deep, but that always looked like your superpower, to me from afar of just dealing with it, processing and just get back to it. So I just got it like that. I'm hearing a little confirmation bias because I want to hear that in your story too. But I'm definitely like hearing that throughout where you're like, all right, I just got to process it. And then I'm just going to keep chugging forward and keep going. And I think that resiliency is so powerful. And it's been so fun to hear weaved in throughout your story.
Thanks. Thanks for that memory. I don't remember that, but it sounds like something I would have done. Dancing is a superpower. You know what? I feel so lucky that I learned
Thanks
as
to
a young
Caryn.
athlete. Hi. Thanks
Everyone's
for
being
being here.
rebellious tonight.
Love you.
I feel so lucky that I learned as a young athlete was
See you in the morning.
this idea of self-compassion, which, we were just talking about, because we're all got, you're going to have bad days. We're all going to have bad days. And that was one of the things that Whitney Post, I mentioned her, she was dating Tom Murray when I was in high school, and ended up coaching me. She noticed that I would get really down on myself when I would have a bad performance. And she was just like, man, this is a long trajectory. Like it's going to take you a long time to get where you're going. And you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. And if you beat yourself up every time you have a bad day, you're not going to have fun. And you're not going to get there because you're going to start hating this, right? So like just have a little more fun. Yeah, so I translated that into partially one of the things I did to like show myself a little compassion was I made sure that I cultivated other interests, because when you have a bad day rowing, there's always something else that you can, there's, you're never just an athlete. We feel like that, right? And we were talking about how your self-worth is so tied up in your performance. But if you have some other things in your life, it's not quite as bad. It's still, it's still like that, right? Like you still just like feel crushed when you don't perform well. But dancing was one of those things.
I have to thank you, Caryn. Like, I think what you just articulated in the last bit about that last cycle when you came back, and really your vulnerability to, like, it takes incredible, I'm gonna use a Yiddish word, I'm sorry, but it takes incredible chutzpah to like call people and say like, what could I be better at, right? I think that takes a lot of self-reflection that not a lot of people have the capability to do, right? To hear the noise, to face the music and face the mirror. So I think that like if you stopped there with what you were saying, I would have been like, wow, like that was like a really bold move, but it was all as a servant leader to team, right? And I think that that's the undertone of what you just said at the end there was it's all about servant leadership to the team, right? And so whether you're one of the 9 people in that 8 or not, you're in service to the success of the team. And I think that is incredibly powerful. I think that like your ability to kind of understand that, take on that role, interpret the feedback. I mean, not a lot of people are calling the national team coach saying seat race me more. And then is, especially with, the knowledge of I have the ability to win a gold medal. I've done that twice already. And then the other piece of it is just the empathy that you had to say, like, I'm not going to make a scene. I'm not going to make it about me. They have their set, to go on to the games. I'm going to go my way, and really be able to own that, I think, is, again, an incredibly powerful thing that'll come out of this conversation for people to understand, real championship mindset versus just an individual contributor. So again, thank you for sharing that. I think that was like so damn powerful. And again, like we just met literally 2 hours ago, but that said, I'm like, wow, like holy cow, like that was a boss move. It really was.
Also the hardest thing I've ever done,
Yeah,
to
had to be.
call, yeah, to call like 30 women and just be like, tell me how to be better.
Sure.
It took me months to get through everybody because I could only handle a couple of those conversations a week.
Well, I've always said, don't ask a question you don't want to know the answer to. And it's like, so you got to be ready to hear the answer.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Steve alluded to it. One of the coolest things that I've felt when getting to talk to all of us athletes and people that have done other incredible things like astronauts, business, etc., is everyone seems to have an edge. And I'm kind of guessing what I think it is, but an edge that you have above everybody else.
Mm.
And, and I think that's the only way you survive. So you're so articulate and you're so intelligent and you're so educated. So like, I don't have to prime this one at all, but I'd love to know what you think was your edge. Like, what did you do better than all those other women in that training center that you just thought like, well, I got this? And more than happy to share, but I think I'd rather see you explore it on your own.
I would say some mixture of love and joy. Love for the sport, love for myself, um, and just joy in being good at something and always trying to get better at it. There's this part of the Olympic Charter that I love, and it says Olympism seeks to create a way of life based on the joy found in effort and the educational value of a good example. And I was like, man, that just in one sentence, that to me is what it's all about, this whole elite athlete thing. And I remember in 2004, I was just like so delighted, just like so happy to be there. And when we went to Chula Vista, I was like, oh my God, I'm at the training center in Chula. Like, this is so cool that we have a dining hall. Oh my God, it's so cool. And it's just like, I love rowing. And I just wanted to like share my love of rowing with people. And I went around asking people like, why are you here? Like, why are you doing this? I wanted to hear other people's stories of like how much they loved rowing. And this one woman said, I'm here because I want to prove to my mother that I'm worth something. And I just felt like the bottom dropped out. I was like, oh, that's very different. That is very different from why I'm here. And I didn't know what to say. And I wanted to like, I don't know, comfort her. I was like, I don't, and she seemed fine with it. She just said it matter of factly. And I didn't know what to say. And she didn't end up making the team.
Yeah, joy is important. I mean, the lack of joy was my demise, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's when you stop having fun. That's when you should stop doing it. You should stop doing it,
Yeah. No, die on your shield. Stop when someone tells you. Caryn, you are a badass. Not only just oarswoman, but human. Incredible human. The work, taking the lead of USOPA, like you definitely changed that. I noticed a big change, and
Okay.
and the emails and everything. And it's like, it's great to see you that despite your success, you still know that athlete rights are important, you know, and that activating that stuff. And one of my main goals of this is always just making sure that athletes who are retired, athletes who are in it, and athletes who are coming up the pipeline have as much knowledge as they can from these conversations to help them. So my final question to you, if you could go back in time and coach yourself, what would you say, and at what time in your life would that be?
That's a great question. I feel like I knew you were going to ask this question, and I thought about a really good answer, and then I forgot it. But if I know what I would do differently, so I suppose I would tell myself to do this differently. We were talking, remember how we were talking about being enough. I was, and I spoke about wanting to belong. Oh yeah, now I'm remembering. Okay, so this is so I was thinking recently about what I want to teach my son. My son is under a year old, so it's a little early, but never too early to start. I was like, what kind of a person do I want him to be? And I thought, I want him to be the kind of person who sticks up for someone getting picked on. I want him to be the kind of person who's nice to everybody. I want him to be the kind of person that people go to when they're having a tough time. And when I think about myself as a young athlete, I was so focused on like belonging myself and feeling good enough myself that I didn't spend enough time worrying about whether other people felt like they belonged, or, oh no, I'm gonna cry, or felt good enough themselves. And it's something that I mean, I was never a bully or anything, right? Like I was nice to people. But I think I could have done a better job at like bringing the people on the edges into the fold. And I did do a little bit of that in later years. Like one of my proudest moments, man, was in this last cycle, the Tokyo cycle. We were all rowing singles because of COVID. And there was a young woman on the team who was very fast on the erg, but not fast in the singles. She just like, she did not row a single, right? And we would go out for a workout, and we'd have to do, I don't know, like 5 laps, whatever we did. And everyone would complete it, and she would still be out there. Like she'd still have another lap to go. And there was one day that it was particularly rough out. And I could just tell she was like super nervous. She was really struggling. And I love rough water, man. I like, that's my jam. So I was just like, hey, I'll do another lap with you. And so I did another lap with her, and it was like, I was like, man, why didn't I do this more often? This feels good. Yeah, I would coach myself to have more compassion for others.
Way to tie a bow on that, my friend. Back to compassion. Thank you. Thank you for everything you've done for the sport. You continue to do for the sport. for being here. You mean a lot to me as a friend and a teammate. You're inspiring, right? From Olympian to Olympian, you are aspiring. So go Huskies. Give Lou
I'm
a
gonna
hug.
go home and tell Lou that.
Yeah, give Lou a hug for me, please. This has been beautiful, Caryn. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for being vulnerable with your own struggles, and thanks for putting together this podcast, guys. Like, it's been really fun. It's really important.
It's been fun showing everybody how not tough I am.
Yo, toughness is way overrated. I was never tough. Like, no.
But no, thank you, Caryn. It's such an amazing story, journey, inspiration, even in the short time we had on the show, just for you to kind of give those insights and tips of wisdom. I can tell you, just to finish us off, I can tell you that if there is an open mic in your future, there'll be a fight for the microphone, and there'll be a line around the door, out the door, to make sure that they could queue up to give you either a roast or respect, either way. So well done on that. I think you have that sewn up pretty well. Congrats.
Yeah. And if you are ever, you're always welcome here. Doesn't have to be this one time. And if you ever have stuff you want to share, let us know. And yeah, you're always welcome at Fast Friends. You are one of my fastest friends.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Caryn.
Thank you. That's all for today's show. Fast Friends is a Metal Factory production. All opinions expressed are our own and those of our guests. If you like our show, follow along or subscribe with us wherever you get your content and podcasts. Thanks for listening.